Epic fantasy takes on many forms, some more familiar than others. One particular trend is to have characters from the real world enter a fantasy realm. C.S. Lewis made this a cornerstone of his Chronicles of Narnia series. I'm your host, Garrett K. Jones, and for the February edition of Author Awareness, I'm interviewing Hannah Pennington. Welcome back to The Right Way. A couple of things coming up that you should be aware of. Today is my writing romance fiction workshop. Some of you might be wondering why a fantasy author would be lecturing on romance. Well, that's simple. Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and believe it or not, I know a thing or two about romance, despite what some people might say. If you're local to the area, come on down to the Hanford Library from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. The class is free. We are also just 5 weeks away from the milestone 200th episode, and I'm super excited for you guys to watch that special interview. I'll be announcing who my special guest is going to be during my live stream on Instagram in just 2 weeks. So, be aware of that. This month's interviewee came to my attention as I was planning out Season 5. Hannah has developed her trilogy to bring her readers on an epic adventure that takes them from Arizona to a fantastical new world. So let's get to know Hannah and the Tindoria Chronicles. All right, Hannah, thank you for joining me on the show. Please tell me about your work and what you write.
Thank you for having me. So I am a young adult fantasy author, and I write exclusively fantasy as of right now. And I have a fantasy trilogy that I'm writing. 2 books are already published, and I have a 3rd one releasing hopefully by the end of this year. But after this fantasy trilogy, I'm hoping to start a dystopian sci-fi novel that I've had an idea for a while as well, but that's going to be a bit of ways away.
Oh wow, dystopian is a huge jump away from fantasy.
It is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, and the inspiration for that one came during the whole Hunger Games and Divergent hype, and that genre kind of seemed to disappear off the face of the earth, I've noticed, but the idea that I have for my book is still around, and I'm hoping to still do something with that.
Oh, awesome. So that kind of leads me into the next question. How did you get into writing, and was this something that you've always wanted to do, or was this something that kind of, you got the idea for it and you're like, I want to run with this?
It was definitely more of the latter. I wrote little short stories here and there from starting around the age of 7. The first written thing that I've done, I remember I was around 7 years old, and I would write a chapter of a fantasy book idea that I came up with, and I would put the first chapter, it was all handwritten, and I would staple the pages together, and I drew my own illustrations, and once that chapter was all stapled together, I actually put it in my best friend's mailbox, and then she would read it and write the next chapter, and then put that chapter in my mailbox. So it's kind of a collab that was really fun, and the book never ended up getting finished. But I remember that was the first time I really started to write an actual story where I actually took the time to plot a storyline, and despite the fact that it never got finished, I still remember the name of it. I think it was called The Cloud Kingdom. But after that, I realized that I really did enjoy writing, and I decided to start experimenting with fan fiction, where I had this strange obsession of killing off everybody in the end in creative ways. I think it was the drama aspect that appealed to me. I don't know why, but I've since grown out of it mostly, but as an author, there are times where you still want to inflict a little bit of trauma on your characters.
Yes.
But so that was my first experience of actually writing. And then around 2010, I believe, I was around 11 or 12, and I saw the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, and immediately I was just drawn into that world, and I had my own inspiration for a dragon-inspired novel, among other inspirations like major works like Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings were the two biggest ones, along with Aragon and a little bit of this film that nobody I know really has seen it, but it's called The Water Horse.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah,
I was obsessed with that movie whenever I was little. And so all of those different aspects from those different works kind of spilled together into the very beginnings of what would become my current work in progress, which is the Tindoria Chronicles. And I started writing it whenever I was around 11 or 12, and around 10 years of editing and drafting later, I finally published the first book. So it did take a while, but that was because I mainly didn't know what I was doing. And it wasn't until halfway through that I realized I actually wanted to take it seriously and publish it for real.
So what has been one of the most challenging aspects or one of the hardest parts of your pathway as a writer?
I would say it was relatively straightforward for the most part. Back for book one, obviously I was much younger, and it was more of hobby writing, so I really didn't have a deadline set. It was just whenever it finishes is when it's finished. And it was not until I finished the draft that I realized, okay, well, now I want it published, but I also want to make sure that it's edited. And so I went to my parents and asked them if they wanted to edit it. And them being quite busy with their own lives, took a long time for the book to actually get past like the first third, My mom would read the first third, think it's great, and then life would happen, and then she would have to reread that first third because it had been a while, and then she would never get past that. So it was just a constant loop. And so the draft actually ended up sitting in limbo for a good almost like 3 years. And so, but because I hadn't really taken my publishing journey as an author seriously, it wasn't that big of a deal. I was just like, oh, whenever you get around to it, it would be nice, to make sure that, the grammar stuff is good. And eventually, once I realized that I wanted to take it more seriously, I decided to start pressing more for it to be edited. And so it went through the first round of edits with my mom, and then a second round of edits with my dad. So first round with my mom was more developmental editing, which was absolutely invaluable. She's got really good insight for finding pacing and character development. So I was eternally grateful for her, especially since I was really young and didn't have a stable enough job to actually fund a professional editor. Mm-hmm. But I knew how important editing was. And then my dad, who actually writes for his job in some degree, was very helpful in helping with the grammatical aspect of the manuscript. And that took probably another 3 years worth of editing, just on and off, trying to fitting it in with their own lives. And I finally published. At this point, I published in 2019, so that was around 9 years after I initially started the manuscript. So once it was published, I was like, great, I just clicked published, and that's all I did. I had no launch strategy. I didn't send out the word to anybody, so that was a big challenge, realizing that I kind of messed up in a sense in terms of not fully understanding the marketing aspect of what it takes to be an author. And so
especially if you do anything independently.
Especially, because I did self-publish. I did choose to self-publish because I love the creative control. Now, I heard that some traditionally published houses will let you have more creative control, but I'm a perfectionist, so I wanted to do the cover myself. I wanted the interior formatting myself because I'm a graphic designer. I could do it for free and have it exactly how I wanted. Also, the fact that royalty rates are a little bit higher, and as a younger kid who, always wanted to buy things, more money was better.
We've talked about, obviously inspiration. We've talked about some of your challenges as a writer. What has been one of the most rewarding experiences? And I don't know why I've never asked this with any other interviewee before, but what's been one of your most rewarding experiences as a writer?
The most rewarding experience for me as a writer, I think, is when people reach out to me in seeking advice, because then they view me as sort of like with enough authority in the field to come to me, and I'm always happy to help people. So if anybody wants to, to DM me on Instagram, I'm more than happy to help, especially with, self-publishing. And a couple of people have, and it's just nice to be able to share what I've learned as a self-published author with others in hopes that it helps inspire them and keep them pursuing and persevering through, because there are struggles in being an indie author because everything is done yourself. And it can also be a strain on your time, your mental health, your wallet. So that's definitely one of the rewarding things. And then obviously reviews are nice, but I mostly write just to share the story that I created and not really anything else, because I love what I've written and I just have to share with other people and hope that they like it as much as I do. And when they voice their appreciation for the book, with reviews or direct messaging, it's rewarding, because there were times where I definitely wanted to give up, especially whenever I realized that I didn't launch the book properly and sold very, very few copies, and I actually stopped writing for a good 2 years until my manager said, "Oh, you're writing a book. I really want to read it." And I was like, maybe I should pick it back up again. So I decided to do some more research and realized that I should probably start an Instagram account. And so I launched a Instagram account, started connecting with other authors that were similar in genre and just self-publishing, surrounding myself in social media circles and learning so much about the marketing world that I learned about beta readers, ARC readers, book launch plans, pretty much everything. And I was like, I had no idea that all of this was an option. If only I had known, because I had published 2 books at this point without a proper launch strategy. But I have another chance with book 3. So I am much more informed and much more prepared and confident in this 3rd book's launch. And, it'll be nice, because when people hear about the book, the whole trilogy will be out already and they will only have to wait.
Yeah. Final question, and this is the one that I always tend to ask every single person I interview. If you could help any other would-be author out there with any advice, what would you say to them?
Please spend decent effort and money into cover art and an editor, because, people say, oh, we don't judge a book by its cover. That's not really true, because the cover is the first thing we see on a shelf in a bookstore, and that will determine whether we pick it up and read the synopsis. Yep. And, if the cover isn't professionally done, or you can tell that it doesn't quite capture the essence of what the book is, it could have pretty typography and everything, but if it doesn't really speak to a certain genre, you're not going to be quite sure what it is, and then it just kind of gets lost in all the other books on the shelves, provided, your book is fortunate enough to be in a physical bookstore. Yeah. And an editor is almost just as important, because especially if it's an indie book and it's not professionally edited, it will be assaulted in reviews for bad editing. And the story could be fantastic, but mistakes that, are glaring are what going to dominate your reviews and will ruin the book. So definitely spend decent money in good cover art and an editor, because it is very worth it in the end, and it is extremely important to book sales. Because
absolutely,
if you write a book, you want to sell some copies.
Well, Hannah, this has been a great interview so far. We're coming to the end. Tell people, how can they get a hold of you and your work?
So I am mainly active social media wise. I'm mainly active on Instagram, and I can be found at hannahpennington.author. And I also have a website, hannahpenningtonauthor.com. And I am always answering DMs. I'm quite active on social media, so hopefully, people will get a response from me within 24 hours if they want to reach out. And I also have a newsletter that you can subscribe to through my website. And if you subscribe, you get the first 4 chapters of book 1 for free. So you can get a nice little preview there. And newsletters will also give you first dibs on any exciting announcements and dibs on book cover reveals and ARC reader opportunities.
Wonderful. Well, Hannah, thank you very much for being on the show. It has been great having you, and I look forward to incorporating you and being able to help you promote your books.
Thank you so much. I appreciated it. And I really enjoyed our time.
Oh, you're very welcome. If you're interested in connecting with Hannah through social media or picking up a copy of her books, you'll find those links by visiting the video description. If you're interested in seeing the uncut version of this interview, you can easily sign up as a supporter through Patreon. There are support options of $1, $3, and $5 per month, and all patron levels get access to the uncut interviews. But the higher you go, the cooler the rewards. Hey, thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications on new videos. You can support the channel on Patreon and the merch store. Those links can be found down in the video description. Make sure to tune in next week for the February edition of Creator's Corner as I continue featuring more writing and world building tips for you guys. See you then.